I wanted to have you on the podcast for a lot of reasons. I think you're terrific. And I think that the news cycle throughout all of this, you have been the biggest star that I've seen.
Tell me more, Lawrence. Jeez.
Well, here's what I want to know. Once Channel 9 decided that they were going to have you work from home.
Yeah.
What did your mind start doing as far as creating a studio at home?
Right. So in my house, this is the only room I have where it's downstairs. We have an upstairs and a downstairs. This is the only room where it's closed off, where I wouldn't have woken everybody up, because my first hit's at 4:00 in the morning. So my family is usually sleeping till about 6:30, and I have 2 kids and my husband, they wake up around then. So I ran around my house trying to find somewhere that would work. And this was our little office that works. But I don't know if you can hear my audio. It's a room without carpet. So I have blankets on the ground. My audio is not excellent. I have, kind of turn it around. There's just this little ring light thing. We moved the desk because the desk was showing that way. So we had to move that so that there was at least something in the background. So you kind of just rush around and see, okay, what would look, it's not perfect, right? Like none of us are, I shouldn't say none of us, some people are doing it really well, but you just make do with what you've got.
Yeah, I think that you're one of the people that's doing it really well. And I was, every time that you do something traffic wise, it cracks me up because you're doing a tremendous job of incorporating your children's toys and the easel and everything else. You've come up with some inspired stuff.
Thank you.
I want to know where that creativity comes from and that freedom to be creative comes from.
Well, the freedom, thankfully, for WGN, as you know, anybody who watches WGN, thankfully, our bosses pretty much, you get away with a lot and you can be creative, which is really awesome to work in a space like that. As far as how we thought, the very first day, so the first Monday, I was one of the only ones at our station working from home. And somebody just wrote on Facebook, oh, you should use your son's Matchbox cars and do a report. So that very first day, I was like, that's a great idea. So I ran and got his cars. And that one was really simple. It was just, hey, look, here's a bunch of cars on the ground. And now that's what it normally looks like. And I pushed him out of the way and I was like, now here's what it looks like on the road, no traffic. So that was the very simple beginning. And yeah, thanks to a viewer. And then I was like, well, I think we can start using that, further. And so last week was probably the most intense one where I rebuilt the junction. So the Montrose Junction where the Kennedy and the Edens connect, I used my son's train tracks to build the roadway. And that it probably took like 2 hours to do.
Did it really?
It's so stupid. But I'm telling you, we have nothing to do here at home. And you're with 2 kids. My daughter is 1, so she still naps. My son's almost 4, so he's not napping anymore. And it's like, I'm up at 3. I have nothing to do then all day with these kids. I mean, we play outside when we can. You do what you can, but it's like, okay, let's start building things with the train tracks. So we do what we can,
Whose idea was it to recreate the Brian Urlacher highway signs?
That was my idea. Did you like that?
I absolutely. Look, I was sitting in my room getting ready to prep for my show, and I watch you guys every morning.
Awesome.
And I looked up and I was like, that is inspired, because when you get around Rosemont, you cannot, like, those signs are ubiquitous. You cannot get away from them.
They're everywhere. Urlacher, Ryan Sandberg. I think my only disappointment was that I didn't do one for Ryan Sandberg too. I'm sorry. I should have done that too. But yeah. And then my next one, I did the tri-state a little further south a couple weeks ago, and someone's like, why didn't you include the Urlacher billboard? And I said, you got to stay true to the area. It's not there.
Right. Right. You want to be accurate in your depiction using
absolutely
roadways.
Is that why you asked me on? Is that the sports connection here?
No, I mean, we honestly, like the great thing about House of L is that I'm really trying to find out how people do their job. So,
yeah.
But the sports thing, like that just, as a viewer, as a longtime Channel 9 morning news viewer, that one knocked me out. Like that would, how much work did you put into that?
That was not, it did not take long at all. Cause I just went on, what's the place called that does the hair Restore's webs or their Facebook page. And I literally just printed out the thing and I taped it on. Yeah. It didn't take long.
I just thought that it was absolutely dope. And then yesterday you did the as we're taping this, you did the grid. Yeah. And I feel like it's so interesting to me because obviously, like, as we're doing our day-to-day jobs, we get used to a routine. It's funny to me that I think that you've actually stumbled upon, like, I would consider that like true journalism, where you're teaching people something that they probably don't know. Like a lot of Chicagoans understand the grid, but I'll even tell you that I'm someone who had memorized going north.
Right.
When I was growing up, we never came north. So I know I grew up on 111th and Halsted. Okay. So I'm a grid kid. Like I get it, but we never came north until I went to DePaul.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah.
Yeah. Like learning, like the simplicity of learning that the numbers go the other way was crazy. And then learning the grid of every 4 blocks, there's going to be kind of a street, and every 8 blocks, there's going to be a street. Learning that was key. So you doing that yesterday, I actually think helped a lot of people.
Well, it's funny because I can't remember, it's 26 or 27 traffic hits a morning. So I'm from, I work from 4 till 8:45. And so I have a lot of traffic hits. And going through this, you know, in the beginning, there was a lot to talk about because, you know, public transportation was constantly making changes, or, you know, the tollway was making changes. Everybody was adjusting to the new normal, if you want to call it that. So I had a lot to talk about. And don't get me wrong, there's been days still with the weather where it's been crazy out there because people are driving a whole lot faster, as I'm sure if anyone who's been on the road has noticed. So some of the crashes have been more severe. So I have had stuff to talk about, but I thought, you know, with that many hits in a morning, why not try to spend 1 or 2 of them going over stuff that I never have time to actually talk about during the normal work week, because it's always so crazy and so busy and you have to get people where they need to be. And we're still doing that. I know there's essential workers that we are still providing that information for, but if I just take 1 or 2 hits a morning out of the 20, you know, some, and kind of get creative and use it to explain either a construction project. And then this week I started doing that homeschool you were talking about, just to kind of explain more of traffic to people. And it seems like people have been really receptive to it and enjoying it. So
I was wondering with the grid in particular, what type of feedback have you gotten?
Good feedback. Like, it's interesting, like what you said, people who say, I've lived in Chicago my whole life, I didn't know this part of it. Like even the part south of the 00. So State and Madison is 00. Typically every 800 block is a mile. And I flubbed it up a little bit when I was talking about it on air. I just said every 800 blocks. I'm like, no, that's not what it is. But I had already explained that, you know, 660 feet equals a mile equals about 8 blocks in Chicago. So I had explained it all, but some people call you out on that stuff and you're like, come on. But it's every 800 block is about a mile. Well, when you get south of State and Madison, that changes. So it goes from the mile to, I mean, if you want to watch the video, I can explain it really quick, but like down to Roosevelt, that's 12 blocks equals a mile. Then after that to Survac, it's 10. And then to 31st, it's 9. Then south of there, it gets back to normal. So that's one thing that I think a lot of people didn't know. And I honestly, I can't tell you why that is. I need to figure that out.
Yeah.
I need to figure out why. I think it has to do with the way it was all built way back when, but I'll figure that part of it out.
but if you get on the Ryan and you see where the exits are, it all makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. 55th, 59th, 63rd, 67th, 71st, 75th. Like it makes sense where, and honestly, like it even kind of goes along with the red line too. Like you end up getting off on a lot of the big blocks on the grid. So I thought that was really helpful. And as a lifelong Southsider, I honestly didn't know that between Madison and Roosevelt was 1 mile.
I know.
I always thought it was a mile and a half. And learning that it was a mile was a breakthrough for me. So I
got called out too for leaving out the southeast side. because on the Southeast, there's not that many. So I just didn't have room for everything, but the same goes for the Southeast side. So it's 800 Cottage Grove, Stony, and it continues onward that way as well. But when you're downtown, obviously it doesn't go east. So you got to get a little further south.
Well, I have another project for you to do. You can do it's a traffic project, but it's,
okay.
I think that it's always interesting. The old Native American paths that are all of our diagonal streets.
Yes.
See, that's something that could be a lot of fun where you're just talking about Milwaukee and Clybourne,
Elston, all of them. Yeah.
Chicago and all these
Ogden. Yeah.
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 Like that to me is a lot of fun. What's it like to be in the helicopter?
Oh, it's cool. We haven't flown they're still flying. The pilot and the photographer are still flying. They work out of Schaumburg. So on a typical morning, if I were back at the station, I would be from 4 to 6:30 in the morning reporting from studio. And then we have a helipad out in the parking lot. And so at 6:30, I run out to the helipad. They pick me up. We fly, land at 7:30. I go back to studio for the rest of my morning, and they go back to Schaumburg. So it's kind of a crazy, just kind of crazy, but it's cool to have that. It's weird not being up there. I love flying, and I love seeing the sunrises. It's just gorgeous. Our city is gorgeous. And so I'm definitely missing that. Yeah.
Had you ever been in a helicopter before you started doing this?
No, my first time, I started filling in for Mike Lorber on NBC years ago. God, this was probably in 2006 or 2007. I started filling in for Mike Lorber on NBC, and before they let me do it, they said, okay, here's a bag. If you don't throw up, you've got the job, because they knew I was in journalism and I had been doing on-air stuff in the studio. So it was basically like, just don't puke and we'll let you continue and try this. I'm like, okay. And I didn't puke. So I still have yet to throw up in the helicopter, even through 2 pregnancies.
That is super impressive that you're able to do that.
Yeah, not bad, huh?
That's badass right there is what that is. This is a weird question because I don't want to insult you, but did you think that your path in journalism was going to take you to the traffic department?
No, never. I honestly didn't even know this was a career. I went to school, journalism school for undergrad, and I went to Syracuse for grad school in journalism. And then I got my first job at the CBS affiliate in Champaign. And I worked there for about 2 years just as a general assignment reporter. And my boyfriend, all my family, who's now my husband, lived in Chicago that whole time. So while I was in New York, while I was here, we had been doing long distance the whole time. So eventually I was like, I would really love to get closer to Chicago. And as you know, in journalism, the next steps would be Milwaukee or Indy, right? So I started looking, I was applying for jobs there. I had a couple interviews in Milwaukee, and I shit you not, I saw a post on Craigslist, and it said, looking for a Chicago traffic reporter. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know. It's in Chicago. I could probably try that. I could do it. It said TV Chicago traffic reporter. It didn't say for who. So I go to this interview and I find out, so a lot of traffic in Chicago, just a little background, is contracted out. So right now I actually do work for WGN, but for years I worked for different various traffic companies, and we were contracted out to different stations. So the contractor at the time made this post on Craigslist, and it was for NBC Chicago. And I got the job, and I started doing traffic on the weekends. I was working at a bar in Wrigleyville during the week, trying to make enough money. And it just all fell into place, and I actually started to really like it. And I thought, okay, well, this seems to be working right now. Let's just see where this goes. So I started doing traffic, doing the NBC weekends. And then I was the fill-in for the weekdays on NBC. Matt Rodewald was the main traffic guy at the time. And then I started filling in for Mike Lorber in their helicopter. Then a job came up for radio, and it was for WBEZ in Chicago. So I got that full-time position as a split shift and continued doing NBC on the weekend. So I just kind of kept learning, kept growing. And like any job, I mean, I didn't know anything about traffic when I first started. So, but like any job, you learn, right? Like you listen to the people around you. And I just tried to be like a sponge and take it all in. And eventually then got the CLTV job, and then WGN hired me, and it just all worked out really well. And I've been incredibly lucky to be on this path. And yeah, I don't think it's anything I ever imagined. I never thought traffic reporting would be my career, my calling. I never sat in my room practicing, you know, the helicopter sound in the background with me recording. But I gotta tell you, I love it. I think it's awesome. And even with WGN now, they give me the ability to anchor too. So I'm a fill-in anchor. So I still have that ability to, you know, do that part of it as well, which is great.
What was the ramp up to learning Chicago traffic like? How does one learn Chicago traffic?
Well, first of all, you're surrounded by people who know their stuff. So I started when I was, you know, just doing weekends for NBC. I also would produce sometimes on the weekdays, which means you sat in a room. At the time, there were 3 people in a room with TVs all over and scanners. We each were in charge of 3 or 4 scanners. And you're just listening, and you're entering data into a computer system that then goes out to all of the clients, all of the stations. So I did that when I first started, and that helps so much. So you're listening to scanners, you're training your ears, and then you're entering the data. And by doing that, I think you really learn. Now, the other side of that is being in the helicopter. At the time when I started, GPS in the helicopter did not work.
Oh.
So as a newbie, Mike Lorber is awesome, right? Like he knew where everything was. I was new. I had no clue, and I was just filling, and I didn't want to look stupid. So I sat in front of a computer and used my Google Maps, and I did satellite view, and I drew every single expressway and tollway in Chicago, what it would look like from above. Was it a cloverleaf intersection? Was it just one? Because and I drew like, did train tracks come over? Because I didn't want to look like an idiot on air if NBC said, go to this location, and I couldn't find it.
Wow.
So yeah, now it's wonderful though. GPS works up there, and it's awesome.
Yeah, but that base of knowledge that you have serves you well, because you have the technology, but you don't need it now.
Yeah, I mean, it helps. I'm not going to lie. I use it a lot. It really helps. We can get there a lot faster. And honestly, the pilots are all amazing. Like the photographers, everybody works like such a great team. Our assignment desks, our news editors, they're the ones up there too, telling you, okay, there's a crash here. They help you with everything. It's such a team process that everybody's awesome, and everybody involved really helps get you there. It's not like I know everything.
You talked about anchoring. And
Yeah.
I think you're really good at it. And the reason that I think you're good at it is that you have an authenticity about you that is dope. And when you're on the air, you're you. And
Thank you.
How important is it to you to come across that way, to make sure that they're getting full Jindra, like they're getting the real deal?
I honestly credit that all to WGN. I go back and I look at some of my tapes when you're first starting out in journalism, I don't know if you did this, but like I go back and look at my tapes, and you try to be professional. Mm-hmm. So I'm here live, blah, blah, blah. Cause you're trying not to sound like a 22-year-old kid talking about TIF districts when you don't know anything about it. Like, so yeah, I think at the beginning it's a learning process, right? And you're trying to be professional, so you use that professional voice. And then when I went to WGN, and everybody's just the morning show, it's just you're you, and I'm like, oh, okay, I can do that. And it's just learning, and I've learned so much from those guys there. So I would credit that all to just being on WGN.
What's it like to have Robin there, who did your job, like did traffic for forever?
I know.
And now is, the most popular anchor in Chicago.
She's amazing. Yeah. Well, the nice part too is she knows when I've got something important that's breaking. She's like, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. Let's do that. It's a bigger story. And when the signal cuts out, she can jump right in and take over. So I don't have to feel bad about that. It's great. I love Robin. She's amazing.
So how do you feel about when you're on the air, your description of our expressways? Do you
Yeah.
do you have to go name or do you have to go number?
I know. My husband gets in arguments with me about this all the time. Because the other day, I don't know if you saw one of my street school presentations, it was about 94. So my example, and people are always like, why do you use names? My example is 94 because it goes from Wisconsin all the way to Indiana and has 7 different names. It goes by the Bishop Ford, the Dan Ryan, the Kennedy. I'm trying to look at my map now. Did I get, the Kingery, which is between the Bishop Ford and Indiana, the Kennedy, the Eden Spur, and the Tri-State. So if I just said 94, it could be anywhere from Wisconsin all the way to Indiana.
Like 65 miles.
Is that what it is? I don't know how far it is.
It's something like that. Because I used to go, I would go to Halas Hall every day.
Yeah.
So I would go from Hyde Park to Town Line Road.
Right.
And that in itself would be about 45 miles. So if you pack in the other 5 miles that it takes me to get to Indiana and the other, 20 miles or whatever it is to get to Wisconsin.
Look at your calculator moving.
It's like 65 to 70 miles, something like that. So yeah, like that actually makes a ton of sense that you want to explain exactly where things are instead of being vague and saying that there's an accident on 94.
Right. So to me, it makes more sense because if I'm a driver and I hear Bishop Ford, I know that's something I use. That's the stretch of 94 I use. To me, that makes more sense. My husband thinks that I should just be like 94 from I-80 coming in, 94 from 95th in, 94 from the Wisconsin state line in. I'm like, well, that's still just so, like, to me, it just is so confusing. Because at least if you hear the name, most people, the majority of people are driving the same route every day, right? So you're listening for your road. And if you keep hearing me say 94 over and over again, you're not getting that trigger you need. That's the Bishop Ford or the Dan Ryan. So I don't know. It's a highly debated issue.
Well, does he have a background in traffic?
No, he doesn't have a background in traffic. Come on. He does construction.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe that's why. All right.
He knows what he's doing. He's driving all over the place. So that's why he's one of the people that, needs to know it all.
All right. So. All right. Then that's more fair than if he was an accountant. You know what I mean? If you were an accountant
who worked from home, yeah.
Right. Telling you about traffic, you'd be like, I don't know
what's wrong with this guy?
I want to do that. What were your goals when you were in school? What were you thinking that you were going to do in this field?
I didn't know, to be honest with you. I liked reporting. I liked anchoring. I even did weather when I was in Champaign. I knew I wasn't excelling at that by any means. I feel like, though, that I am in the perfect position now where it's just able to be creative and do things like we've been talking about while also doing the breaking news, the anchoring, the reporting. So I guess if you would have asked me back then what the perfect combination would have been, this would have been it. Something where I'm able to kind of be creative while still exercising the journalism muscle, if you will.
It's a weird thing to notice someone for, but you kind of first came into my purview when you were very honest and open and very educated on the Eastland disaster.
Oh,
and
really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought that was incredible work. So what made you decide that you wanted to share that story and share it so publicly?
So for those people that don't know, I did a story at the 100-year anniversary of the Eastland disaster about the disaster. And I tied in my family's history to it. So growing up, I was on the Eastland Industries baseball team because my dad sponsored it. They run a small family-owned business in Hillside. It's called Eastland Industries, named after the Eastland disaster, or the Eastland boat. All because I had 2 relatives, a great aunt and uncle, who were on that ship that died the day of the Eastland disaster. So it kind of just got passed down through our family, where that became the family's business name. And I just thought it would be really interesting. I never really knew much. I knew that the Eastland was part of our family history, but I didn't know much about it. So I thought with it being the 100-year anniversary, it would be an excellent time to kind of go back and look at that And thank you to the Eastland group. They're awesome. They were able to put me in touch with, some of the books that had some of the data on the passengers that did die and the passengers that didn't as well. And I was able to find my relatives in there. And we even went to the cemetery where they were buried. It was really enlightening to just kind of get more information about our family history with the help from, the Eastland group.
Have you seen the show on ESPN called Peytons Places with Peyton Manning?
No.
There's a whole episode on the Eastland.
No way. So what's his connection?
Okay, so the tie-in to make it super Chicago-y is that George Halas was supposed to be on the Eastland.
Did he work for Western Electric?
He did. He worked for Western Electric, and he was supposed to be coming to the picnic, but he overslept. And so everyone had thought that he had died. So his brothers are like knocking on the door.
Wow.
And he's like, what's going on? And he was completely alive. So when they did the 100-year anniversary of the NFL, they were talking about how if George Halas gets on the Eastland, there may not be an NFL.
That is wild.
I'll send you a link to it. It's really bananas.
It's crazy too how you say, they didn't know if he was alive, because back then, it's not like you got a text message. My family tells the story too of people, a day or two later, they never came back. So they, drove into the city and had to go through warehouses, and you were looking for your loved one. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it's. I'll send you the link to it, because
that's awesome.
I'm sitting there going, as someone who loves like Chicago history stuff.
Yeah.
That blew my mind, and some of the stories behind it, like just it was really, really cool. So seeing you do that, I thought was dope, and I do think that it speaks to a level of freedom that you guys have at Channel 9 that unparalleled locally around the nation. Yeah,
we're very lucky, very, very lucky.
Well, thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.
Yes, thanks for inviting me. Everyone's like, who's this girl?
Are you kidding me? People know you now. Like they I'm sure Brian Urlacher is going to tackle you when he sees you in public the next time. Or maybe
I'll bring him my little thing I made. Yeah.
I mean, he probably loves it. Like Restore, I would imagine, really loved that. I'm shocked.
I'm sure. I was thinking, should I have written them and asked first for some money? So I've got an idea, but I'm going to need 20 grand first.
I'm going to need some, what they like to call payola.
Yeah. Journalistic views. Like,
get out of here with that nonsense.
I was not paid at all for that.
I know you weren't. You were just out there doing great stuff. And so I think
you're so sweet. Oh my
gosh.
On
the podcast. And I know that your babysitter's leaving and you got two little nightmares that are getting ready to happen for you.
I was so thankful this week we had a babysitter 2 days this week. I'm like, it's amazing.
Well, you keep doing great work, and
thank you. You too. You're so sweet. Oh my gosh. Have a wonderful day.
You too. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
How do I get?
I'm gonna let you out.
Do you just wait to make people look stupid?